Welcome to another edition of Schwartz on Sports here on Sportce.com. I'm your host, Peter Schwartz, and this is an all NFL edition of the program as we're going to get into the whole NFL lockout and the NFL draft. In a few minutes, I'll be joined by esteemed NFL player agent Alan Herman. A little bit later on in the show, I'm going to talk to former NFL quarterback and current Sirius NFL radio talk show host Jim Miller. So we're going to talk entirely about the NFL tonight and everything that's going on. And obviously, it's a big week for the NFL. And first of which, it's the draft Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And of course, there's the lockout mess going on. The judge ruling yesterday that the lockout had to be enjoined. And now we've got more legal mumbo jumbo going on between the two sides. And I was thinking all week about how here it is, a huge week for the NFL. You've got the draft coming up. It's one of the most high-profile events that the league can have, and yet we're overshadowed by the lockout and what's going on. And I was thinking I'm going to spend this opening tip talking about, ranting on the league and the players that the game is in a lockout. A $9 billion industry is in a lockout at this point. Why are we at this point in such a prestigious time of the year for the NFL coming up? Now, of course, yesterday comes the ruling that the lockout is over, but I'm still going to rail on both sides because the fact that we're even in this situation, that we're talking about having to have a lockout lifted in a $9 billion industry is ridiculous. It is unbelievable. And you know what? The bottom line is, when this whole mess is over, the billionaire owners are still going to be billionaires, and the millionaire players are still going to be millionaires. Now, they may make a buck more or less here and there and try and squeeze a little bit more out in terms of pensions, and they deserve it, and obviously they put their bodies on the line. But really, it's hard for the average American sports fan to deal with this nonsense that's going on. A few years back, the NHL had a lockout and we lost the entire season. You could almost understand what happened back then. The NHL was in a situation where a lot of teams were losing money, television money was not there, advertising revenue was not there. The league needed a change in its economic system, and you can almost understand that the league had to shut down for the year to get things right. But the NFL is a $9 billion industry. TV ratings have never been higher. Revenues are high. The NFL's marquee classic event, the Super Bowl, was the highest rated program ever in the United States. So what's the problem? How can the two sides not come to an agreement on how to split up $9 billion? Now, look, there's really no sense in choosing sides in a situation like this. It's a mess, and there's no win. The real losers are the fans, because as of right now, we don't know if there's going to be an NFL season. We don't know if the ruling that the lockout has to come to an end is going to be kept up. We don't know what's going to go on. The losers right now are the fans and the employees of the NFL and their teams that are being affected. You've got the Jets having to furlough some of their employees for a week each month. They let go of some people. The Chiefs fired people. Players are, employees are taking pay cuts. People who cover teams are affected by it. Those are the real losers. And in the end, where is all those people going to recoup the money that they're lost? But in the end, the owners are going to get their deal. The players are going to get their deal. And I just hope, whatever happens with the whole legal mess, that there is a season this year and the two sides can sit down at the table, and that's where this thing should end, is at the table, and come to an agreement that's fair for both sides. Now, having said that, we're going to talk about the NFL lockout in a minute with player agent Alan Herman. A little bit later on, we'll talk NFL draft with former NFL quarterback and Sirius NFL Radio's Jim Miller. That's when Schwartz on Sports here on Sportce.com returns right after this.
Welcome to Sports. My name is Greg Dorman, and this is Rally Notes.
Racing fans, don't forget that on Thursdays at 7 p.m., it's time for Rally Notes. Greg Dorman, rally racing co-driver from Klein Racing, hosts guests and takes your calls about the entire automotive industry, rally racing, and auto racing in general. Rally racing is a great sport. They have Subarus and all sorts of off-road, all-wheel drive vehicles that run through the mud and the backlogging roads. But he's not only talking rally, he'll talk all sorts of racing and automobiles as well. We'll test cars, we'll drive cars, and we'll have a lot of fun. Rally Notes, 7 p.m. on Thursday. Don't miss it.
Live on Sports.com. I'm Peter Schwartz, and we're joined by one of the current.
If you want everything sports, you got to tune in to Schwartz on Sports. Tuesday nights at 8 p.m., Peter Schwartz, the esteemed broadcaster, takes on everything sports. He's got everything from high-end pro sports like the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball to alternative sports like extreme games, lacrosse, tennis, golf, and everything in between.
Joined by Minnesota Vikings Hall of Famer John Randall. Last year, you were inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and that is the biggest honor that a player can get bestowed on him. What was that feeling like when you were enshrined in that candidate?
It was unbelievable.
You got to check out Schwartz on Sports because there's nothing you know that he doesn't. He knows everything sports. So check it out, 8 p.m. on Sports.com, Tuesdays.
I'm Justin Tucker, the New York Giants, and you're watching Sports.com.
If you want everything sports, you got to go to Sports.com. That's spelled SPORTCE.com. We're going to take you behind the scenes in the world of sports and a lot more. It's sport, content, and entertainment. We got a lot of great stuff. Technology segments.
Now it's got the front and back facing cameras, so you can do video chats like this one via Skype on the 3G network, and you can do FaceTime, only available on the Wi-Fi. It's got a lot of other great features. You can edit on it with iMovie. You can make songs and voiceovers.
Behind the scenes.
We back, Sports.com, at this secret location behind the scenes. Jim Jones.
We'll take you into the lives of athletes, follow them off the field, but it's also music.
Be right here, but it's perfect day.
And other genres as well. Check us out, Sports.com, and we've got live shows 5 days a week. A lot of live shows with live guests in our New York City studios. We've got Rally Notes at 7 p.m. on Thursday nights, The Warning Track, 6 p.m. on Friday nights, Schwartz on Sports with esteemed broadcaster Peter Schwartz, 8 p.m. on Tuesday nights, and on Wednesdays, it's The Music Movement with Darryl Reed. Check us out, Sports.com.
And welcome back to this all NFL edition of Schwartz on Sports here on Sports.com. I'm your host, Peter Schwartz. A little bit later on in the program, we're going to talk to Sirius NFL Radio's Jim Miller about the upcoming NFL draft. But right now, we're going to turn our attention to the lockout that was enjoined yesterday by Judge Nelson in Minnesota. We're going to welcome in now one of the outstanding agents, a very well-respected agent in the NFL, represents some top-notch players, including David Harris of the Jets and Nick Collins of the Packers. Want to welcome in Alan Herman. Alan, Peter Schwartz, how are you?
Peter, fine, thank you. Thanks for inviting me on.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. And tell us what life is like for an agent right now in the NFL with what has happened, the lockout being lifted by Judge Nelson yesterday, and now really chaos has spread around the NFL with players trying to get into facilities today. Some were successful, some were not. In fact, Chris Kenny of the Giants, one of the only ones that was allowed to work out. From your standpoint, what's going on with your players, and what are you telling your players to do in this situation?
Well, the word I was going to use was chaotic, but you beat me to it. This is, you're trying to plan for a draft, which was, of course, part of the previous collective bargaining agreement that the owners opted out on. And, so that's why we're obviously very busy with that. Players coming in and, communicating with teams concerning the draft. And so now we get the decision by Judge Nelson, which seems to be a final decision, although it seems like we're going to have to wait another 24 hours before she gives us the final okay as to whether she's going to go along with a stay or whether she's just going to enforce her decision here, which is that the lockout is illegal and that the players, should get back to work, and the league would face serious antitrust issues should they prevent the players from coming in and working out and back to business as usual. So we got certainly a chaotic situation with everything going on at once. Do we have free agency? Is that going to begin? Do we have? We're going to be able to sign our undrafted players, college players who go through the draft. Can we sign those guys immediately after the draft, which occurs on always also a chaotic situation after the draft?
Well, but under the lockout, those undrafted free agents couldn't sign. I mean, that was one
correct.
of the things, right?
But if everybody goes back to work as the judge has indicated, then those players can sign.
Right.
Okay. And then what's the formula we're working under? I mean, for the owners now, there's also a significant change. If we're playing under last year's rules and there's no modification of the rookie scale, then someone like the Carolina Panthers, might have to readjust who they're going to draft in the first round, because they'd have to commit $50 to $70 million to someone like Cam Newton. Are they really going to do that, or are they going to pick someone else? If they have to pay that much money, are they going to consider maybe drafting someone else now, because the amount of money that was in the rookie cap a year ago will be significantly greater than would be if there was a new CBA? So there's a lot going on in the business right now that's that truly, your word chaotic, fits the bill.
Yeah, you have teams trading out of the top 10 on Thursday night if things stay the way they are.
Every year you read about teams trying to trade out and they don't have trading partners. And one of the reasons why you've seen so few teams trading out is because no one wants to pay the exorbitant amounts of money that you have to pay for guys in the top 5, top 10 players. Mm-hmm. So what you've seen in previous years, nobody's trading.
Right.
Nobody's trading down, because nobody wants to trade up and assume that kind of liability for a player unless they really sold on them. So I'm not so sure you're going to see. So it all depends on the formula we're working on. If we're working on a smaller rookie scale, and there is a change to how rookies are paid, then more people would want to trade up, and you'd see a lot more trades in this business. But we don't know what the system's going to be this coming Thursday.
We're talking NFL agent Alan Herman here on Schwartz on Sports on Sportce.com. The NFL in the midst of a chaotic situation with the lockout, or we're not in a lockout. We're not really sure what's going to happen over the next 24 to 48 hours. But Alan, assuming that the lockout does come to an end by Judge Nelson's order and free agency starts in the next few days, I know you can probably only speak for yourself, but have agents, like yourself, have you been planning and talking to your players that are free agents about where possible destinations might be? I mean, this is obviously going to be, again, a chaotic situation in a couple of days.
We've had those discussions already, but then again, what's the system? Are we talking about free agency after 6 years, or are we talking about free agency after 4 years? If we're talking about, what are we talking about?
Right.
I mean, if it's free agency after 6 years, well, then the pool of players who are going to be free agents is dramatically reduced. So we're not talking about a significant group anymore. If we're talking about free agency after 4 years, or if we're talking about franchise tags being ruled illegal by the judge because it's a restraint of trade, and now they can't hold on to them because there isn't any more franchise tag. Now we're talking about guys like David Harris and anyone who was franchised. They're immediate. Tom Bahali, they're immediately free, who are both clients of ours. So no one right now, no one really knows what the heck is going on, to be very candid with you. And so it's hard to plan for the unknown. It just strikes me as a little odd that, considering Judge Nelson's decision, that the league did not have a game plan for today. It almost seemed like they were ad-libbing their way through. Yeah. Players were showing up at facilities. Initially, they were locked out. Then all of a sudden, they opened up the doors in Pittsburgh. Other players came in. Mysteriously, the strength coaches weren't there. So, it really seemed like everybody was ad-libbing their way through the situation today.
Yeah,
I would think that by tomorrow it will we'll have a clearer picture of what's going on.
Yeah, and Alan, last thing, along those lines, Brandon Moore of the Jets said today it was a very awkward situation coming in and being met by people with the organization saying the coaches were not there, you can't work out. A very awkward situation. From what you heard from some of your players, was it that same feeling around the league today?
Yeah, all around the league, the same thing occurred. I mean, obviously, if the head coach was around, I mean, they were all very nice to their players. It just seems that, nothing's moving forward at this point. There aren't any workouts taking place. The unfortunate part here is that this whole work stoppage is one in which the owners wanted. I mean, obviously, they opted out of the CBA. I mean, they had something that was working. The owners felt that they weren't generating enough profit from the existing system. They didn't say they were losing money. No one said they were losing money, but they felt that they weren't making as much as they would like. So they opted out of the CBA, which seemed to be working for both sides. So and now we have utter chaos. Now the players are saying, well, we want a total free agency. Right. We don't want franchise tags. We don't want, we're going to court on the Brady, Manning, with an X number of players who are all suing the league. So we don't know what changes. That's going to take a while. That lawsuit won't be heard for a while. Right. But clearly there's a lot at stake here. There's a lot at stake for the owners. They've lost the first major battle here on Judge Nelson's decision. Their track record in the past has not been great in terms of these litigations, and the lawyers are making a fortune on both sides.
Oh God, yeah.
But the bottom line is the courts seem to favor what the players' position here, and so let's see what happens if there's going to be any room to negotiate between the owners and the trade association at this point. There isn't any union anymore. And what they can talk about, obviously, with DeMaurice Smith is the litigation. The lawsuit. The Brady lawsuit against the league. I mean, they could, by coming together on a new CBA, they might be able to eliminate that. So that's kind of where we are at this point.
Well, we all
it's a mess, and it's discouraging. It's discouraging to agents, to players. And certainly to fans.
Absolutely. The fans want the game back. The media wants the game back. I want to cover football again this year, and we certainly hope it comes back. Hey, really last thing before I let you go, I've been seeing one of your clients on TV twice a week, watching his wife on Dancing with the Stars. Hank Baskett's been in the front row watching Kendra. Yeah. That must be a kick for you to see that going on.
Yeah, well, that's always a lot of fun. I've met Kendra numerous times. She's a great young lady, and she's a lot of fun, and it's kind of fun to watch these kind of things. Of course, I'm not I have not watched too much of Dancing with the Stars this year. I've been a little bit too busy with pro days and draft. My wife is a big fan of Dancing with the Stars, but haven't watched much of it this year. So you've probably seen Hank Baskett more than I have.
I probably have. Sitting with my wife watching it every week. Hey, listen, Alan, thanks so much for a few minutes. I appreciate it, and continued success, and good luck with the draft this week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Alan Herman, NFL agent representing a lot of NFL players, works for Sports Stars based here in New York City. When we come back, we'll talk about the NFL draft with former NFL quarterback and Sirius NFL Radio's Jim Miller when we come back here on Sports.com right after this.
Welcome to Sports. My name is Greg Dorman, and this is Rally Notes.
Racing fans, don't forget that on Thursdays at 7 p.m., it's time for Rally Notes. Greg Dorman, rally racing co-driver from Klein Racing, hosts guests and takes your calls about the entire automotive industry, rally racing, and auto racing in general. Rally racing is a great sport. They have Subarus and all sorts of off-road, all-wheel drive vehicles that run through the mud and the backlogging roads. But he's not only talking rally, he'll talk all sorts of racing and automobiles as well. We'll test cars, we'll drive cars, and we'll have a lot of fun. Rally Notes, 7 p.m. on Thursday. Don't miss it.
Live on Sports.com. I'm Peter Schwartz, and we're joined by one of the current.
If you want everything sports, you got to tune in to Schwartz on Sports. Tuesday nights at 8 p.m., Peter Schwartz, the esteemed broadcaster, takes on everything sports. He's got everything from high-end pro sports like the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball to alternative sports like extreme games, lacrosse, tennis, golf, and everything in between.
Joined by Minnesota Vikings Hall of Famer John Randall. Last year, you were inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and that is the biggest honor that a player can get bestowed on him. What was that feeling like when you were enshrined in that camp?
It was unbelievable.
You got to check out Schwartz on Sports because there's nothing you know that he doesn't. He knows everything sports. So check it out, 8 p.m. on Sportce.com, Tuesdays.
Welcome back to Schwartz on Sports here on Sportce.com. I'm Peter Schwartz with you every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. This coming Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, it's the annual NFL Draft. Despite all the legal mumbo-jumbo and the work stoppage stuff that's going on with the league, the draft will take place as scheduled Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And on the line to talk about it with us is a former NFL quarterback and currently a talk show host for Sirius NFL Radio. We welcome in Jim Miller. Jim, Peter Schwartz, how are you?
Peter, I'm doing great. Good to be with you, bud.
It's good to be with you, too. Last saw you at the Super Bowl. That was always a good time. And now we get ready for the draft on Thursday night. And I don't want to talk too much about the lockout. I want to get into the draft. But in your mind, from taking phone calls and having your hand on the pulse of the league, is it just me, or is there just a lack of buzz about the draft this year?
Well, I think you're right, Peter. I think there's a little bit of a black cloud, and I think the NFL tries to do a little damage control, saying, "Hey, we've got 25, young college stars that have committed to the NFL draft, to be there at Radio City Music Hall." And they tried to gin up a little interest by getting some veteran players to announce, legends of the game, so to speak, like John Lynch, Barry Sanders, to introduce these young athletes into the pro ranks. But that to me is just a little bit of a damage control. I think there is a black cloud that is hovering over the 2011 NFL draft, all due to the work stoppage.
Yeah, I was very disappointed to see that you weren't picked by the Bears to introduce their second-round selection.
Well, hopefully sometime in the future, Peter. There's always hope, brother. There's always hope.
Absolutely. Let's get into the draft. And obviously a lot of talk around the Carolina Panthers with the first pick. And if you talk to most draft experts, everyone will say there's a pretty good chance. They're not 100% sure. Most people are anywhere between 75 and 90% sure that the Panthers are going to take Auburn's Cam Newton, the outstanding quarterback and Heisman Trophy winner, with that first overall selection. In your mind, is Cam Newton going number one to Carolina?
Well, I know a lot of people, but for me, when I just look at Ron Rivera, who's taken over the Carolina Panthers as a head coach, realistically, what is the impact of Cam Newton year one? And we can always say, hey, don't pass on the franchise quarterback, but, realistically, Cam Newton is not a polished product coming out of college. I think they're doing a good job of the salesman's pitch saying that they're going to take Cam Newton, but realistically, I think it still could be Patrick Peterson, Von Miller, the linebacker out of Texas A&M, and I would not be surprised at all if Marcel Darius, the defensive tackle out of Alabama, he's the guy, in my opinion, that could make the most impact, here in 2011 for the Carolina Panthers. And I think Ron Rivera knows that, and I think they understand that they will have to go out and get a veteran QB to really man the helm until somebody like Cam Newton is able to take over the ship, and that's a few years down the road. So realistically, I'm one of the few that don't see them taking Cam Newton. I think they go defensive tackle with Marcel Darius.
And the scary thing, Jim, about drafting Cam Newton with that first pick is we'll find out in the next couple of days what's going on with the lockout. But if they're working under the old rules, they may have to come up with some big money for Cam Newton as the first overall pick, whereby if they went in another direction, they might not have to pay out that kind of signing bonus that you would normally get for a number one overall quarterback. So that's probably something the Panthers are thinking about right now too.
I agree, Peter. That's a great point. You look at last year, You know, Sam Bradford alone got over $50 million just in bonus now. That's guaranteed money bonus, you know, with his being the first overall pick for a quarterback by the St. Louis Rams. His contract is close to $80 million total. And so Jerry Richardson, who is the owner of the Carolina Panthers, you know, he's been pretty, you know, what I say, you know, bullish about this labor agreement, and that rookie contracts need to be put in the right perspective. And I don't see him wanting to shell out that type of money, considering his team alone last year in 2010 were one of the, you know, they were well under the salary cap, I should say, by close to almost $40 million. I mean, there was only an $80 million total payroll for all of Carolina. So I just don't see the owner, Jerry Richardson, shelling out that type of dough for a project quarterback like Cam Newton.
What about the Super Bowl champion Packers? Obviously, they're going to be down at the bottom of the first round. They're obviously, when you win the Super Bowl, you always start to think about how you're going to get a little bit younger and plug some holes. And where do the Packers go in terms of this draft? I mean, what are they looking to do to try and keep things steady for themselves over the next few years?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of analysts have them taking a running back, and I just don't get it. Because you look at Ryan Grant, they just signed him to a big contract a year ago.
Big money.
James Starks came on strong. He was a 6th-round pick out of Buffalo last year, and he really came on strong towards the end of the season. They still have Brandon Jackson and Noah Herron. So I don't see them taking a running back at all. I think it's really best available for the Green Bay Packers. And where they're sitting at number 32 in the first round, it easily could be a spot that they could trade down or select, say a offensive lineman like Danny Watkins out of Baylor, I think would be an ideal spot or ideal pick. You look at Akeem Ayers, if the outside linebacker who's talented is there, I think they could use that. Or say even a secondary player, like an Aaron Williams out of Texas. Charles Woodson's not getting any younger, so I think they're really going to have the pick of the litter to really increase their needs at positions that are getting older and positions that have failed that team. And we know Ted Thompson does a great job, and most likely he'll probably just take the best player available. He believes in building through the draft. You
mentioned UCLA's Akeem Ayers, their outstanding linebacker. It would seem to me, Jim, that he'd be a perfect pick for the Jets at number 30.
Yeah.
I mean, the Jets coming off of back-to-back trips to the AFC Championship game, but they're in desperate need of someone who could help out that pass rush. And it would seem to me that the Jets sitting there at 30, if Ayers is there, they have to grab him.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. They've been high on not only Akeem Ayers, but Brooks Reed, the young talented defensive end down there at Arizona, who probably can be converted to a linebacker. He really has garnered a lot of attention by the New York Jets. And I don't know if I believe this, that they're interested in Phil Taylor, a big defensive tackle out of Baylor also. He's about 330 pounds because they already kind of have that big guy with Siona Pua.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I'm buying that. I agree with you. I think they need a big-time pass rusher on the outside. Not that Jason Taylor can't do it anymore, but he's getting older in the tooth. He just can't give that dominating presence he once could. And I think that would be a huge asset for the Jets moving forward. And that Rex Ryan really wants to focus on that. The other guy I'd probably think of, take a look at Justin Houston out of Georgia. That's another guy. He reminds me a little bit of Adalius Thomas, who Rex Ryan coached over there in Baltimore for all those years, and that could be another player in the wheelhouse where the Jets select in the first round.
Hey, Jim, there's no question Rex going to put his foot down and take a defensive player. There's no question about it. Let's go, last thing, we have about a minute to go. Let's go back up to the top where the Broncos and the Bills are going to go 2 and 3. You mentioned Von Miller's name before. Well, I think Von Miller would look great in either a Bronco jersey or a Bills jersey. I think he'd fit in well with either team.
Well, I agree. I mean, if you look at the hypothetical, if, say, everybody's assuming Cam Newton goes 1. If Cam does not go 1, I think Cam will go number 3 to the Bills. And the reason why I say that is the Buffalo Bills, just in my discussions with them, they don't view Blaine Gabbert as an upgrade to Ryan Fitzpatrick. Cam Newton potentially could be.
Right.
And what I mean by that, you look at Chan Gailey, he did those things with packages with Cordell Stewart, the slash roll for the Pittsburgh Steelers early in his career. They could do that with Cam Newton. And if that doesn't happen, I think you're right. Everybody loves Von Miller. This is probably the one player everybody assumes is bulletproof. Not only he produced in high school, he produced in college. 17 sacks a year ago. This guy is a dominating player. Went down to the Senior Bowl, dominated there. He's dominated in his workouts. So there's not too much not to like about Von Miller. I think if they, for some reason, if Cam's gone at 1, Von Miller would be their lock for sure at the number 3 spot to the Bills.
Hey, Jim, I can't thank you enough for spending a few minutes talking about the draft, and hopefully after the draft we'll actually get a chance to talk football and all this lockout saga will be over and we can focus on what's going to go on the field in 2011.
You know how it is, Peter. Save the drama for your mama.
Jim, thank you. Jim Miller, former NFL quarterback and now talk show host for Sirius NFL Radio. I want to thank him. Also want to thank NFL player agent Alan Herman for joining me here on the show. I'm Peter Schwartz. Thanks for watching Schwartz on Sports here on Sports.com. We'll see you next week.